welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel, where I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise, and one of my windows has seen on the OBS has somehow not shown up. Oh, I see, that's why. I'm on the wrong spot. And there we are. I had it still on the screen layout for my language-related stream. So, how's everybody doing? Hello, welcome back, Katie. Good to see you. Just that zoom. Cutting off my arms, which is a bit weird. So, when last we met, we were looking at a debate between a bunch of people who suck. We had Cenk Uygur, we had fucking Brianna Choi Gray, we had all, like, the shitty people, and some, like, libertarian dingus by the name of, Robbie Suave, like, just to round out the shittiness of the panel. And I was thinking we might continue that, but I had a little surprise for you. I was reminded of this. This is actually from a few years back. But friend of mine reposted it on Facebook. It came up in her Facebook memories. And yeah, so thought we might take a look at this. Was I don't know if you know this, but there is a sort of a competition for bad sex in fiction, for like the shittiest sex scene of any given year. And perhaps you may already know this, or perhaps you do not. But racist singer Steve Morrissey, he wrote a novel back in about 2015, and he won the award for bad sex in fiction. So I have this paragraph here that is, hello Adrien, that is what won the award for bad sex in fiction in 2015, and I thought I would share it with you. It is really, really impressively bad. It is like so bad that you would think that this is like ChatGPT was specifically asked to come up with the most unappealing, fucking, like, badly written erotica ever. But here we go. I just thought I'd read this aloud. It's a quick one, I think. It brightened my day in a very strange, sort of counterintuitive way, so I'd like to share it with you. Eliza and Ezra rolled together into the one giggling snowball of full-figured copulation, screaming and shouting as they playfully bit and pulled at each other in a dangerous and clamorous roller coaster coil of sexually violent rotation, with Eliza's breast barrel rolled across Ezra's howling mouth. I don't understand how any of this works. Like, did he, like, visualize this before he wrote it? Because it seems like people's bits are falling off and, like, doing their own thing. Yeah, oh, he sucks in all sorts of different ways. Oh, well, I'm Elise. You are possibly the... Somehow, I have ended up in Britain with an inordinate number of friends called Cat. So you're like the first person on the entire island who I've ever encountered who could theoretically be Cat, based on her available name, and decided not to. So that is a distinction you have, Katie Marshall. And the pain frenzy of his bulbous salutation. What is this, like a fucking balloon that he sent up? Extenuating his excitement, that's not what extenuating means, as it whacked and smacked its way into every muscle of Eliza's body except for the otherwise central zone. Like, I mean, I would love to see somebody try to illustrate this fucking thing. Because it just sounds like everybody's bits are sort of falling off and taking on lives of their own. Or something, yeah. But so, I was thinking we might try to finish off this whole thing with Cenk Uygur and Brianna Joy Gray and all the horrible people arguing over the best way to waste time with electoral politics. How's that grab everybody? Does that sound like a good plan? I've got a whole bunch of other stuff otherwise. I don't even remember where we left off. There was just so much bullshit going on. I mean,
and by the way,
yeah, I mean, the whole thing was like, Brianna Joy Gray wants people to waste their time on an opposition party in a country where opposition parties are all but banned. Cenk Uygur has just gotten done saying that the only time he will stop, like, recommending people, just hold their nose and vote the Democrats is if by some miracle the Democrats suddenly become a Democratic Party and somebody like decent just kind of shows up in charge of it. Hello, River Rune. Oh, I'm sure there's some more horrific Caleb stuff in there as well. We may manage to have time for all of it. So yeah. I mean, he just literally said he was going to stop trying to kick the field goal with Lucy holding the ball right when he actually kicks a field goal, which is just, I mean, you gotta love the commitment to the grift. Because at this point, I really have trouble believing anyone at this level who is, like, treating electoral politics like it makes any sense, and particularly in this fucking country. And I'm leaving out, I always leave out binding referenda because I think that is actually a different matter in a lot of respects. But, I mean, I think that's a fucking grift.
Well, that's impossible. No, it's not. Bernie came this close in 2016. And
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Because Bernie fucking, in 2016, he was never going to get it. He was never even planning to get it. I bet he didn't even have a plan for if he got it. Because the thing is, the whole way the whole system works, it doesn't really matter what anyone casts their votes for, because there's always a way to manipulate it so that the leadership's candidate gets in. I mean, show me the time that the DNC are actually shocked and dismayed by who gets in as the Democratic Party candidate, and I will actually believe that there is some possibility of any kind of democracy within the party.
And he came this close in 2020. He won the first 3 states.
Yeah, he came this close, and then what happened? Yeah, he was actually, like, the front runner at one point. Biden was way down. And what happened? Like, the 3 runners up behind him, immediately got together, dropped out of the race, and handed Biden all their votes. Biden, who was in, like, 5th place at the time, And all of a sudden, because you're just allowed to do that, you're just allowed to hand somebody else your votes without, ever even consulting the people who cast them. And suddenly Biden was on top. I mean, that is how fucking bent this system is.
And who stopped him? Was it the Democratic Party that
Yes!
stopped him?
Yes, it fucking was! Who do you think adopted the rules that said you can do the things that made it possible? How do you think adopted the rules that say that you can just hand over your votes like this? You can just kind of drop out and hand the votes to the person in fourth or fifth place. Suddenly make them the front runner.
No, it was corporate media that then
No, it wasn't corporate media. Corporate media did not write the rules for the fucking primary. Corporate media does a lot to legitimize those rules and treat them as normal, even though if elections were run like this in Bolivia or Venezuela, according to the rules that are totally legitimate when the Democratic Party uses them for primaries, that would be all the proof that the U.S. needs that that the whole thing's a sham. But because it's, the dominant party in the U.S., I consider the Democrats and the Republicans, for all intents and purposes, to be two factions of one party, so the dominant party in the U.S. And the results suit capitalists. It's treated as if it's just totally normal, and nobody says, wait a second, that's fucked up. He's, seriously, are we supposed to pretend that we don't remember what happened?
Tons of negative coverage on Bernie. Can we get past corporate media?
That wasn't what did it, though. Tons of negative corporate coverage is not what suddenly meant that the runners-up who were standing between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden on the ranking dropped out and handed their votes over to Biden to make him the front runner. They're not the ones who made that happen. Apparently Barack Obama played a role in talking to them and saying this was the time to drop out or something like that. But it was fundamentally the DNC who adopted rules that made this possible. Similarly, you have a primary system where where people don't all vote on one day, which is just a weird fucking thing. This is not normal. So the result of this is that people are not all getting to vote on the same slate of candidates. And so it favors the people who can actually afford to go and stay in the race the whole time and keep actively campaigning until the last votes are cast. And that means that a candidate who is in any way insurgent and is not the one favored by the leadership is always going to be at long odds, no matter how popular they might otherwise be, no matter how shitty the leadership's candidate is. It wasn't the corporate media. He's going to pretend that the Democratic Party had nothing to do with this? How old is he? God, That's a good question. I have no idea. He's 53.
Of course we can.
You don't
I
think
know
it was the
it's super
Democratic
hard,
Party?
and that's their wall that's meant to keep us out, right? But look at us. You're doing it on Rising. We're doing it on Young Turks. And all of us are getting past it by having these conversations.
Wait, he said that they're by being on the Hill, they're defying the corporate media? Motherfucker, the Hill is corporate media. Yeah. I love the irony of the term woke scold. Thoughtslime pointed it out when he was having a go, actually, at Cenk Uygur, over some of the transphobic bullshit he was pulling. Yeah. The thing is, and he said, the irony of it is that the term is used to scold people for not being racist and misogynist enough. The trouble with all money out of politics is that that can only happen as if you're also getting all money out of the economy. As long as capitalists own the economy, it doesn't really matter what mechanisms are in place on campaign financing and stuff. Like, I mean, you go to, like, say, Western Europe, there are much stricter campaign finance laws than here, or, say, in Britain. All sorts of shit that's just normal here, you could actually end up getting done for there. And you get basically the same outcomes.
And having it reach the American people.
How's the audio, by the way? Do I need to turn the video up?
A progressive win a primary? Absolutely. But we need to have progressives who try.
Wait, wait a second. Where a primary? Where? Which kind of primary? We need to have progressives who try. What the fuck?
And who bring us together on economic issues like Bernie did in 2016. And then I guarantee you victory. That's also what the book is about.
So the book is about if Bernie could have won, then what? Like, you're using an example of somebody who lost. You're using an example of somebody who, like, in a minimally democratic primary probably would indeed have won, but because of the way these primaries work, there are a million ways to prevent them getting in. I have to say, I'm just glad that he's 53, because I was just thinking, yeah, I mean, he looks kind of old as fuck, and then I'm sitting here thinking, oh, he's going to turn out to be my age, isn't he? And I was going to, like, feel fucked up about that. So I'm glad that he is 9 years older than me. I'm holding on to that.
I guarantee you victory in 2028.
Jay, you don't think that the Democratic Party played a role in Obama calling the leading candidates, including Pete Buttigieg, who at that point had done better than Joe Biden, and asked him to drop out after the South Carolina win?
Like, literally everybody who had any name recognition was doing better than Joe Biden. He was, not surprisingly, because his unpopularity was already well established before that primary. He was already a guy who was at long odds. Like, the head-to-head polling actually showed him being the only person Trump had a chance against.
You don't think that that's evidence that the Democratic Party is willing to do whatever it takes to consolidate around a non-progressive candidate?
I mean, yeah. And the thing is, it's not just being willing to do whatever it takes. The thing is, it's totally within the rules to do what they did. That's the problem. It's not that they did some sort of cheap, illegal deal and violated their own rules or anything like that. Their own rules are this dodgy.
Brianna, I don't disagree with you 1%.
Well, that's so weird because what you said totally ignored the part where it ignored literally everything she just said. So you agree with her totally, at the same time as you just got done saying it was nothing to do with the Democratic Party? Like, how does that work?
That's not what I'm saying. I know Obama did that. I know that the so-called moderate Democrats, who are actually corporate Democrats, coalesced. By the way, Elizabeth Warren has done many great things in her career. You cannot wipe that away. But her not coalescing with Bernie, both in 2016 and critically in 2020.
Yeah, but what does that say, Cenk, about the way that these primaries, that you're, like, telling us to stake everything, to stake our entire chance at actually, having an indefinite future rather than a fucking countdown that just happens to last a couple of centuries, and therefore doesn't actually feel all that urgent on a certain level? Like, you're telling us to stake all of that on this primary system, and you don't seem to feel the slightest bit conflicted about that, and I find that fascinating. He is fascinating, this guy.
Cannot be forgiven. It was just, when they coalesce, we have to coalesce.
Yeah, but the thing is, the reason that their coalescing mattered was that they're allowed to just throw their votes to whoever the fuck they want. Like, I mean, if there were a rule that, like, some sort of instant runoff rule, where if somebody drops out, their votes automatically say go to the top candidate, whoever's doing the best in the polling or something like that, the result is different. If you had a mechanism that said, for example, that people can vote based on preferences, you would potentially have a different result, because Joe Biden was unpopular as shit. But instead, you have a situation where candidates in these primaries can simply say, okay, well, I'm just giving my votes to whoever the DNC tells me to, whoever I feel like it. Now, never mind that my voters probably hate him. Oh, well.
Anyways, but Brianna, what I'm saying is that was not the critical factor.
How was that not the fucking critical factor? It changed, it went, just because of what she just described, Bernie went from the front runner to being way behind.
Obama can get all of the corrupt Democrats together and all the corporatists together, and they can go, whoa.
Corporatists, fuck off. It's bullshit.
But if the media doesn't then smear Bernie and doesn't elevate Biden, it doesn't work.
Except that the media did not do that. Like, the thing is, Bernie Sanders dropped out of the race. The thing is that he probably couldn't afford to stay in the race at that point. Because if you're fundraising off of people that have limited resources, there's only so much you can do. If you're fundraising off of people who have unlimited resources, there's always going to be money on tap for whatever you need. But if you're fundraising off of people who have limited means, which he was, then it's going to be much harder to continue going in a primary system where you don't just have one fucking vote. Where you have to, go from state to state to state and all this nonsense. That is, the media didn't do that. The media did not make him also drop out and, hand his votes to Biden, too.
It's the media that's the critical part. The Democrats try to rig elections, but if the media didn't play along, that plot would not have worked at all. Bernie would have won the 4th primary state, and it would have been over.
The problem is if he... The only reason is, see, if you had a system where the votes for the candidates who drop out just cease to exist, then you could kind of make this argument. Because then Sanders would have been way ahead of Biden. I mean, it wouldn't have been close. We're talking something like 30 points, I think the difference was. Biden was unpopular as shit, as he has continued to be. But that's not the system that exists. So the media does not change the fact that suddenly Biden got a whole bunch of votes that nobody cast for him because he was always pretty much everybody's last choice except for that prick Delaney who nobody even remembered was running. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this whole thing is based on he's just pretending. He has to, and he also has to just make it about corrupt Democrats or corporate Democrats or something like that. When in fact what he's just talking about is the people who actually have any say over what the party does. Because there's no mechanism. This isn't in Britain you at least have the formal mechanisms of something that looks like an allegedly democratically run party. You have CLPs, your constituency labor parties. They can theoretically be the ones to nominate candidates. Of course, in reality, it doesn't really work that way. There are all sorts of ways that the head office can go and just manipulate shit, and we're seeing lots and lots of that right now. But that's not even in theory how the Democratic Party works. There is no fucking institutionalized way for an ordinary person who votes for Democrats to have any direct influence on what Democratic Party policy is. The whole thing is completely stitched up at the top. You could fucking fit if you put every single person who has real decision-making power within the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, it's not all that different. In Sophia Gardens Cricket Ground in Cardiff, it would still not look all that much more empty than a long-form county match on a rain-affected day. You would have tons of seating left over because, I mean, the number of people who actually have any real decision-making power over the party they number at most in the hundreds.
We were so close. My problem with progressives in Congress is we got near the goal line, and now they're going backwards. And they're going, oh, corporate Democrats, we bow our heads.
Well, what the fuck did you think they were going to do? Their career depends on the people who actually can decide what kind of funding they get, what kind of campaigns they get. They decided, I mean, it's like, wow. I mean, it's like somebody is really shocked. Like somebody who that's a friend of theirs who joined the mafia is now doing corrupt things. Like, what did you think that the organization was about? Did you think that they were going to do like non-mobbed up things? Like, of course they're going to be doing what the organization says, because there are people who actually have pull, and then there are people who don't, and your career depends on the people with pull. So if you want to have a career, and these people clearly want to make a career, they're going to do what the people with pull do. The entire fucking organizational structure is designed and functions to ensure that what he's saying is just an absolute fucking mushroom dream.
We all endorse Joe Biden. Are you nuts? What are you endorsing Joe Biden for?
Because they want to continue having a career. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting watching the way these CLPs. Both this was happening during the Corbyn interregnum, and it's happening now with Queer Harmer Casey, where you have these CLPs that were basically defunct up until Corbyn got in. The only reason that anyone decided that there was any reason to be at all involved in the Labour Party was that Corbyn got in. Hey, thank you, and yeah. So the fucking and they keep on holding these pricks to account, or trying to, and so the NEC, the National Executive Committee, can just find all sorts of exciting new ways to shut them up. Like, there was just a thing right now in London Council, in Hackney North. There was a right-wing Labour councillor, very good friends with the mayor of Hackney, who turned out to be a nonce, got convicted of it. After he was charged, he was still hanging out and going to parties with the mayor of Hackney. So Hackney South Constituency Labour Party said this isn't on, and demanded, issued a series of questions to the Hackney North CLP and to, Hackney Council, and said, hey, what the hell is this? Who knew about this? How is this allowed to go on? How long has this been going on? And London party leadership immediately intervened, kicked out the CLP officials who had been raising these questions, and put in unelected right-wing assholes that nobody wanted, that nobody heard of, and had no connection to the constituency. I mean, so it's the same, you have a different structure. You have a structure that at least nominally offers have some kind of democratic control over the situation, but the reality ends up being the same. Because, it's all happening in capitalism, and capital finds a way. It's like life in Jurassic Park.
He's a terrible candidate. He's a weak candidate. He's gonna lose. He's not very progressive.
He's not very progressive. Fuck you. He's been a right wing. He actually, when in his Senate runs, he marketed himself as, I quote, a true conservative. The whole, anything progressive he's ever pretended to stand for is just the result of having to put on some, sort of red makeup in order to make people who are already kind of disgusted at the way that Bernie Sanders got shut out yet again, in ways that had absolutely nothing to do with whether he would have won in a fair contest. Yeah, and so, Biden pretended to stand for all sorts of progressive shit, none of which has happened.
And you endorse him without getting anything in return? Don't you know, even elementary politics, use your leverage, for Christ's sake. Guys, you've got to trust me on the numbers. We're going to win these primaries.
Use whose leverage? Who has leverage in this situation, Jenk? I mean, God, I mean, he's like, I mean, this is like a whole new level to the Charlie Brown with the football thing. And look at fucking how snide that Suave is looking, Robbie over there, because I mean, even he's a fucking libertarian. They don't know shit, but they know this sounds dodgy.
And mainstream media gets weaker by
Mad
the day,
Cat,
and
I'll go
we
for
get
it. I like it.
stronger by the day. Those primaries are ours. It's just like
No, they
even
fucking
today,
aren't.
why don't we have a more forceful primary against Biden? Because while the media whines and complains about Biden, the minute that anybody steps in the race, they go, "How dare you? Go ahead."
Yeah, well, I mean, so you're saying again, he's like acting as if the Democratic Party had not themselves been stepping in to do this, had not themselves been intervening, did not themselves have actually the power to decide how their primaries function and whether they're going to have one at all. I mean, they've gone to court for the right to fucking, rig the shit out of their primaries.
To the leader, if you're a Democrat and you're a progressive, are you nuts listening to corporate media? No, do not ever listen to corporate media.
How are you not corporate media, though?
Their job is to lull you back into sleep and make sure that you love the status quo and that you obey corporate rule. Do
Yeah, as opposed to Cenk here, who's telling you that there's totes a way that Bernie could still win. If the entire Democratic Party fundamentally changes overnight, and there are like free and fair primaries, and everything suddenly turns into dark chocolate or something, then maybe you could have a candidate get through a primary who isn't backed by the leadership.
not do that. Go and fight in the primaries. It is not at all too late. Look, if these are the only...
No, it's just fucking pointless. I mean, look, people have now sat through two different, for a long time. I mean, actually, Bernie Sanders, I'm very critical of it, but one of the most useful things the man has done has been to get a lot of people interested enough into internal Democratic Party politics that they could actually see where the smell was coming from. Because you couldn't pay close attention to those primaries and come away thinking that there was anything, that they were anything but them just fucking bent as a dish licker's hind leg.
Choices we have, voting for Marianne Williamson in the primary is the biggest no-brainer a progressive should ever have. There's no reason in the world to vote for Biden. She's both a stronger candidate and a more correct candidate.
Jake, let me ask you this before we go, and I'm sure you get into some of this in your book. I think you're so correct to rail against the mainstream media.
Fucking Robbie here. Yeah, I agree with you. I like his glasses. Those are very nice. There's something very sort of 80s Chilean secret police going on there. But when he's having to try to find a positive thing to say, that's that means he's just watched the cringiest shit he's seen all day.
Corporate media and the choices that they make, and obviously we're part of a corporation, so I guess I can't say we're not corporate media, but
yeah, exactly. You're the Hill. This is pretty fucking mainstream bullshit.
We try to platform and celebrate alternative narratives like your own. But let me ask you.
Wow, that is damning with faint praise right there. Yeah, your alternative narratives like your own.
This because you went after Jimmy Dore a little bit a minute ago. I've noticed that in a lot of these independent and alternative media spaces, voices we've featured on the show before, people who got big by having very pro Bernie Sanders audiences and messages have had, if not a right-wing drift, I'm not sure that's in the direction of progressivism or...
Oh, this will be interesting because, of course, this is an interesting point because fucking... well, actually, Cenk has been doing transphobia, hitting that pretty hard lately. And Brianna Joy Gray thinks you should literally work with Nazis. And, I mean, I remember reading this debate that she had with somebody, Tara Levine, I think, who was saying, well, I mean, yeah, it's all well and good to try to, de-radicalize Nazis, but that's, a waste of time, really. There aren't that many who are going to be okay with that, and who are going to respond to that. and our time could be used in a lot of better ways. And she's like, what are you talking about de-radicalizing them? I just want to work with them.
Of normal Bidenism either. It's in a direction, I think, of being more open to the right. People like, or people whose audiences I think have that perspective, like Glenn Greenwald's audience, Russell Brand's audience. We're going to be talking about Russell Brand later today.
I just love that Russell Brand is being defended by Andrew Tate, which is like being endorsed, getting a character reference from Tony Blair. I mean, if Andrew Tate shows up to say that the way you treat women is good, you need to find another planet, because that is like the most fucking damning thing. You don't need anything more at that point. You do not need any more evidence against a person than the approval of Andrew Tate.
Today, for anyone watching this right now, that kind of thing. How does that square with your thesis on the inevitable takeover of progressivism?
Which we still haven't defined, incidentally. Isn't it interesting? They never define what the hell progressivism is. It's so convenient. Like, when I talk about what I want, when I talk about goals, and I notice this with other revolutionary leftists for the most part, talk about goals, and they're pretty clear. Your MLs talk about taking over the state in some way, and that's supposed to be a transition to communism. It hasn't worked that way yet. But they're very confident that it will eventually happen. But they're very clear that that's that's their idea, that's their game plan. You talk to me, you say, well, I'm an anarcho-communist, and I want to have communism, and I think the only way that we're going to be able to get it is if we organize from below as a working class, and, marginalized and oppressed people, and fight together to take over directly at the levers of real power, which is to say, the means of production, the means of human survival and stuff like that, and build networks of care so that we are actually protecting each other in every way possible. And my goal fundamentally is a classless, moneyless, stateless society. These people just say, oh, we want progressivism. Well, what the fuck is that? They're not even saying something like Medicare for all. They're not giving any political goal. Because the minute you actually start putting political goals in there, you've got actual goalposts, and you start to look at where the Democrats stand on these things. Since all of them, since Cenk in particular, his whole horizon is the Democratic Party. But the minute you start to say, just single-payer healthcare, a pretty fucking moderate policy goal, it's basically the way most countries work. And it's extremely popular. Vast majority of the public supports it, and has for a very long time, according to polls. But then you have to accept the fact that most of the people who actually have any poll in the party are against it. Well, yeah, taking over the state. I consider overthrowing the state and establishing a new state to be a form of taking over the state, because for the most part, that's how it ends up working. The state, because it is still the capitalist state. It's a capitalist state with a red flag little popped on the top of it, and so it's going to end up working roughly the same way. It's the same fucking machinery. I mean, it's the same thing when these people are sitting here talking about electoralism right here, and it's where you're debating over who should be in charge of HAL, the hostile AI from 2001, who's decided that humans shouldn't live.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. Number one, people are getting so frustrated with the Democratic Party because they almost never deliver, that they're looking for alternatives. I mean, look, as a meta issue.
And could we talk about those alternatives? Maybe a non-electoral one. Could we have somebody who talks about, organizing? And talks about, building our own power rather than one method or another of sticking a piece of paper in a fucking box and hoping politicians will do the right thing by us, even though they basically never do?
That's why Trump won in 2016 in the first place. The country...
He's not wrong there. I mean, Trump won because most people because basically poor people could not really bring themselves to take off work and vote, because they were not given any options. And that's the thing. One of the things that never gets discussed very much in these sorts of circles is that voting is very much an ABC1 kind of activity. Likelihood to vote is very directly proportional to income and personal wealth. And the minute you take that into account, the minute you realize that the people who are most screwed over by the society are also the ones who trust the electoral system the least, a whole lot of the talking points that liberals like to use just fall apart.
Is so deeply anti-establishment, except no one on TV will ever tell you that, because they are the establishment. They're not going to come on TV and go, hey, by the way, country, I'm going to end the gas.
What is the establishment?
Here. It turns out you guys all hate us. They're not going to say that, okay?
It's funny, sometimes they have, though. Sometimes but they do it in a very backhanded way, in a way that suggests that it's the problem. Like, once in a while, you'll see the media look at polling data that shows that a whole lot of people really do not trust dominant media. And they will act like this is a problem with those people, rather than there being a bit of a credibility gap with the dominant media, because they basically are, they're a propaganda system, and they've been caught out a number of times just being completely full of shit. They will sometimes acknowledge these things, but it's always as a problem with the people who feel that way, as opposed to the people responding to a problem that exists in the world. Because institutionally, they really cannot conceive of themselves being part of a problem.
Okay.
Anyone who thinks that is never going to get to any place with any kind of pull within the media system. Yeah.
So that is the absolute reality here. So, but when you get into the Jimmys of the world, there's audience capture and there's financial interest, and then some have just lost their minds, in my opinion. Okay, and so, for example, Jimmy does a video that's pro-vaccine. It doesn't get a lot of views. He does one that's vaccine skeptical. It gets a lot of views.
That's very interesting. Assuming that's true, and it sounds like it could be true, I haven't checked it out. There's other examples of it. There's this guy, this English doctor, or, well, he's not like a physician, he's not a medical doctor, he's he has a nursing degree, and he has a doctorate in some sort of like health-related field. And for a while in the early years of the pandemic, he was actually putting out quite informative, balanced, scientifically well-founded stuff. For a while, it was good stuff. And then he went off the deep end, and it coincided with a major spike in views. And he started doing all sorts of bullshit about, like, fucking horse dewormer and all this other shit. And has since then just become utterly useless. Well, the nice thing about terms like establishment or elites, is that everybody can take them to mean whatever the hell they want. I mean, that's why I try to stay away from terms like that. Or if I use them, I try to give some sort of a very clear definition so people know. Because, like, Nazis can talk about the establishment. I mean, they sometimes do. But what they mean by the establishment, and what someone like Cenk Uygur means like the establishment, and what someone like me might mean by the establishment, though I don't use the term in the first place, would be fundamentally different. But if everybody's talking against the elites, or, no, not Andrew Wakefield, this is a YouTuber, John Campbell or something like that? No, not Wakefield. I mean, Wakefield was even dodgier, but I don't think that he actually... This is a guy whose channel I only became aware of, and people only really started watching when COVID started. And I believe his name was like John Campbell or something like that. Let me see. Now, it's been so a while since John Campbell. Yes, John Campbell is his name. It's been so, because he just completely moved over into just high grade far right propaganda bullshit, anti-vax stuff. Not like warning people about the limitations of available vaccines for COVID, but just indulging in all the dodgiest bullshit about them and stuff like that. And it coincided with him, with him starting to get a huge uptick in views. And I think those things probably are related, because the algorithm definitely on YouTube promotes the shit out of fash stuff. They can complain about being censored all they want, but the reality is the algorithm loves them.
Guess what he does next? 20 more videos that are vaccine skeptical. That's called audience capture, and you partly do it for the ego, and you partly do it for the money, and it takes strength not to go in that direction. And the right wing is going and...
It would not take me any strength not to go in that direction. I don't get that. I mean, like, if I started getting a huge number of new viewers, and they were all, like, mouthing that sort of dodgy, fashy shit, I would immediately start to wonder what I did wrong.
Capturing these hosts one by one. And everybody has their different things. Look, I don't know Russell Brand and Glenn Greenwald's situation, but I do know...
Oh, well, I do. The guy was fash to begin with. I mean, that's the thing. Katie, you may remember this. I mean, you're in Britain. I mean, I imagine you also caught some of this discourse. This is like back... Remember when the BBC was trying to make Russell Brand like the spokestwat of the working class, and they trotted him out so he could sit here talking about, oh, mate, I don't want to have poverty. I don't want to have them elites and shit like this. Well, the thing about Campbell is he does know stuff. He just stopped doing videos about the shit that he knows around the time that he started to make it big. He, if you go back to his early stuff, it was actually serious science communication. And there is a very steep drop-off. Yeah, Glenn was writing white supremacist propaganda back in the 2000s. He just had a couple of years where he was doing some decent, actual journalism for a couple of years. He took a break from it. He came back. But Russell Brand, when he started, the BBC started promoting the shit out of him. I remember because a lot of trots in South Wales gave me shit for I'm this carping anarchist who lets the fucking the perfect get in the way of the good. Why can't I just accept what a wonderful gift it is that we have Russell Brand? And it's like, well, because he's a misogynist with fash ties who started out his career as a puke-up artist. And I think that's kind of fucked up, personally. I mean, and that was widely discussed. Like, the fucking fascists he hangs out with and the dodgy shit that he started out his career with were all amply discussed. Like, none of this stuff is new. He didn't make some pivot to the right. You see people in, especially in North America, I've noticed, they get this idea that he made some sort of pivot to the right. But no, he was there all along. I mean, but he's using this vague language. This language like the establishment or the elites and shit like that. And when you use that language, that is an excellent way of dealing with, an excellent way of sort of trying to sidle up to left-leaning people, if in fact you are a fascist, but you kind of want to get into their spaces. And fascists have a long history of doing this. They're very good at it. At least when dealing with the unwary, the inexperienced sort of people.
That sometimes if some people have done terrible things, where are you going to go? You're not going to go to the left, where they're going to out you and they're not going to support you. You're going to go to the right, where they circle the wagons and they say you can do anything you want as long as you agree with us.
Jake, I have to offer some, I think, pushback there. On two fronts. One, I do think that you're accurately describing a psychological phenomenon where if people are getting a lot of criticism and pushback, some of which they perceive to be bad faith, there is an inclination to spend more time with people who have been nicer. I'm not saying that's a moral choice, but it is an obvious psychological outcome. And does that mean that people within the left community should perhaps extend more grace to each other?
Yeah, this is a bullshit take. I've heard this take from, like, Tim Pool as well. Like, that the reason people become Nazis is because Nazis were just nicer to them or something like that. It's bullshit. That's not how it works. People, I mean, the thing is, the people who are on the left and, like her, have sidled up to neo-Nazis and are, like, willing to work with them, were already pretty reactionary to begin with. You know, if you pay attention to their discourse, if you pay attention to their positions on things, if you pay attention to the things that they get annoyed about the left, and the things they complain about, you can actually see these movements happening years in advance. There's no surprise in there. The people, so, like, and they always do this thing where it's like, oh, the left left me. And it's like, no, that's not actually what happened. What happened is, you started being increasingly reactionary, and you expected leftists to just sort of pretend that it was okay that you were doing racism, that it was okay that you were saying that maybe we should just coexist with Nazis, and shit like that. And, you know, and then you moved over to the people you were comfortable with in the first fucking place. I mean...
So that doesn't actually happen. And the second I would just want to ask you about, you know, similar accusations, I feel I would be remiss not to bring up, that have been made about your network, Young Turks, about the $20 million of Katzenberg money that some people have argued changed the direction of TYT's coverage in a more liberal and less left direction.
Well, I mean, they were pretty fucking liberal to start out with.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll take it one at a time. Should people show each other more grace on the left? Absolutely. At the same time...
Well, I mean, why don't you extend that to yourself, then? Why aren't you showing more, like... I mean, this motherfucker, just, like, a couple of weeks ago, after he decided to just go all in with anti-transphobia and transphobia, this motherfucker, like, decided to respond to an employee who said that she can no longer work for TYT because this reactionary atmosphere was a hostile environment for her as a trans woman. And he took to Twitter and slagged her off. And, like, cast aspersions on her mental health and stuff like that. And this motherfucker's talking about showing more grace? Like, seriously?
You notice a phenomenon. It's okay to point it out. So it's okay for us to point out what Jimmy does with his videos is super obvious. It's one thing to criticize the Democratic...
I mean, that's one thing that's true. It is super obvious what fucking Jimmy Dore is doing.
Party, as you can tell from this interview, I do it very regularly and very forcefully. It's another thing to say the Republicans are okay. The Republicans are not okay.
What's interesting is it's like, this is such an excellent example of a phenomenon Chomsky describes about the U.S. electoral system and the media system in general, where he says, you know, one of the best methods of social control, of, like, sort of restricting the area of debate, is to have a really narrow debate, but have it be very, very vigorous. So yeah, you can say he's been very critical within a very narrow framework of the Democratic Party. You can say that. Because he has said some critical things. Of course, the reality is, if you, like, if you expand it to include things that are not really so much part of this discussion, you, like, the reality of exactly what went down in these primaries and how these primaries work in the first place. Not some backroom, like, conspiracy sort of thing, but just the actual rules that by which they are openly operated, then he actually looks like he's letting them off massively. But he can very reasonably say that he is also critical of them.
The Republicans are a disaster. The Republicans are much worse than the Democrats. Okay, now, on to the second issue. Yeah, so then people go and look around and they go, okay, well, the Young Turks got $20 million investment. Okay, now here's the things people don't know. People say Katzenberg was involved, no question. The amount he has is near microscopic. And so...
Microscopic compared to what? I mean, 20 million isn't microscopic to me. Like, seriously, a tenth of 20 million? would more than solve every single problem that I have that could be solved by fucking money. And that is most of the problems I have in my life. Like, that isn't microscopic to me. What are you, when you say it's microscopic, it's compared to what? Are you saying compared to the total assets of the motherfucker who gave you 20 million? Who gives a shit? Of course it is. He wouldn't be, if all he had was 20 million, he wasn't going to give it to your ass. You'd be keeping that.
And by the way, we paid the money back. So I be honest, that's breaking news. We've never told anyone that, but we did.
Why didn't you tell? I would tell people that. I would tell people that immediately. Because it creates a fucking... It does create a certain impression. Are there receipts for this transaction?
So, that has no influence on us. But
now, I mean, when you're saying he paid it back, you mean he he just returned a donation, or was it a loan? Did he get a $20 million loan and he repaid it? Because it's not really clear what's going on here. I mean, $20 million can come in various forms, and some of them you would expect to pay back. And he's being very ambiguous about...
Most importantly, Brianna, people just make up that we went towards the right way.
No, nobody's making it up. You're doing it. I mean, Anatransphobian went on a far-right fucking YouTube channel to just embrace every one of, like, all the major white nationalist talking points. And you stand her all the way. Admittedly, they've actually been pretty racist to begin with. I mean, you had all sorts of misleading demagoguery bullshit about, like, bail reform, like a year or so ago. They've been kind of shit on that. So you can't really say they've strictly moved to the... Although, and Anatransphobian has been a reactionary for a while. But it seems like the just openly slagging off trans people like the two of them have been doing lately does really kind of seem like they might have moved a little bit to the right.
Or went towards the moderate Democrats. I mean, they call me, like, the lunatic fringe that follow Jimmy.
See, I mean, the thing is, he uses the term the lunatic fringe. First of all, ableist as fuck. But... he just uses this to avoid ever really dealing with who he's with the political positions of the people he's talking about. He uses that language right now to talk about Jimmy Dore people. And yeah, I mean, they're fash. I mean, Jimmy Dore is just promoting fash shit at this point. There's really no serious discussion to be had that he is doing that. It is pretty open on his part. But, I mean, that's also how he talks about anyone to his left, and that's like that's literally the entire left. But everything that I would actually consider to be left, because again, I try to define my terms clearly and consistently on these things, and when I say left as opposed to left of something, I'm talking about, like, anti-capitalists. I'm talking about revolutionary anti-capitalists of one sort or another. That is my bottom line for what left means when it is used in an absolute term. So, like, literally anyone I would consider left is to the left of this motherfucker, but he just uses ableist slurs to talk about.
Say we're establishment shills. They haven't watched 1 minute of the show. I mean, look at what the things I said to you before this question, right? Does it look like a 1% pro-establishment? But they will see that and go, aha, nail it, he's for Hillary Clinton. Well, look, I can't help you if you're not dealing with facts and logic.
Oh, wow. I mean, is he doing a Ben Shapiro? Is he going to fail to make a woman come next?
You can't show anything where we're in favor of Hillary Clinton.
Well,
no one fights harder in the primaries.
I notice he qualifies that in the primaries. I'd like to see some proof that he's critical of these right-wing Democrats during the general.
Against corporate Democrats than TYT does, Young Turks does, and I do. I formed the Justice Democrats to fight against corporate Democrats.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things where I just have to sort of shake my head a little bit was, like, when, like, Lentz from the Source was talking about all this and was actually, eventually, like, quite critical and had Olayemi on to really point out just how fucked up all of this was, and that was great. But he's like, you can't deny the things that Cenk has done. He formed the Justice Democrats. That's just a way to get people who are, like, critical of the Democrats, who have already realized the Democrats are a dead end, back into the fold. That is a favor to the Democrats. It is not a favor to us.
Democrats, and we defeated them. There's nothing more practical and more
Defeated them where?
real than what I did there in that instance.
I mean,
but they still run the fucking party. Like, where did you defeat them?
I think specifically one of the moments that I remember of TYT being characterized as no longer capturing the spirit of the Justice Democrats, or what the Justice Democrats were supposed to do, was the moment around Force the Vote, where there was a push for the elected squad members to take an adversarial relationship to the Democratic Party and Nancy Pelosi specifically.
And this will be interesting to see what he says about this. See, personally, like, a lot of dodgy people were behind the whole Force the Vote thing. But I do actually think that it was a useful thing, and it was an instructive thing. Actually, the whole thing was instructive as hell. How am I on time? Oh, I want to see Celtic play. That is, like, footy is not my sport. I'm a cricket. I love cricket, and I enjoy hurling as well when I get a chance to see it. But seeing Celtic play I would love that, just for the fucking singing. But the whole thing was instructive, because the first thing is, the minute you talk about forcing the vote, it's useful specifically because it would actually demonstrate that the problem isn't just the Republicans on the issue of single-payer healthcare. That actually the problem is that there is bipartisan opposition to this extremely popular and absolutely necessary idea that would save over 70,000 lives a year that are currently being murdered by the insurance industry. So it was instructive in the sense that, of course, the squad knew what side their bread is buttered on, and they weren't going to make waves, and they didn't. And it would have been instructive if the fucking vote had been forced, because you would have actually seen how little real support there is in the Democratic Party for this thing that so many people are desperate for. I count myself amongst that. I have this wonderful insurance policy. It charges me $200 a month and covers literally none of the ongoing healthcare needs that I have. It's wonderful. Absolute pricks, the lot of them. Oh, yes, I've seen Shinty. On YouTube, you can actually watch Shinty coverage in Scottish Gaelic. And I've done so. The sound is shite, but, I mean, it's really cool.
To withhold their votes for them the same way that we've now seen the Freedom Caucus model with withholding their votes for Kevin McCarthy at the beginning of this year, really testing the theory of how that would work and getting in return a number of concessions that I think we can all acknowledge would be amazing for the left to have achieved. And at that time, despite there being a poll that TYT put out of its audience, where a majority of the TYT audience seemed to support Force the Vote, the newscasters,
Yeah, but I mean, what I want to know is what her point in saying Force the Vote was. I thought it was a good idea in the sense that I knew that it was not going to work out and it would discredit the Democrats. They would not be able to continue this grift where they just blame the Republicans for the fact that they never do anything good, because it would become clear that most of them don't support it either. But my impression of a lot of the Force the Vote people is that they literally thought that if the vote went through, that we would have fucking... we would literally have fucking single-payer healthcare right now. Like... I have to say, I watch occasionally BBC Alba, just to see the Scottish Gaelic programming. And, they could really do with some new sound equipment in general. And an update on their language teaching programs. Because they have that show from, the fucking 70s that looks like it was, recorded on some kid's, Fisher-Price tape recorder, or, somebody's fucking 8-track or something like that, with all sorts of noise. Motherfucker, I could put a noise gate on that thing right now. for like just each episode, just put a noise gate on there, and it would improve the sound quality no end. No professional sound engineer would need to work on that for more than an hour per episode, probably more like 5 minutes per episode, to make it watchable. Where they could just like record new stuff. There's like there's a whole lot of sort of an explosion, low key, of like Scottish Gaelic being spoken in a lot of places, and it could be it'd be really cool.
The personalities on the show were very much against it, and as I'm sure you can remember, that caused a significant rift down the left that persists in many ways. What do you say to that? I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, it's crazy. But thank you for bringing it.
Oh, more ableism. Neat. Okay, let's see how he deals with this.
No, because I'm happy to address it and try to clarify it the best I can. Guys, do I look like I don't want to force votes? Oh, of course I do, right? And I tell every congressperson that's going into Congress for the first time, if they'll listen to me, I tell them, you have to create what the civil rights movement called good trouble. Now, that doesn't mean you go in wildly and flailing around doing impractical things, but it means you...
What are impractical things, though? What counts as an impractical thing? Because this is the sort of language, again, it's this vague language. Anyone can think, like, people will substitute, since it's a very abstract concept, what is practical, what is not practical. They will sort of substitute in their own ideas of what is practical and what's not practical. But he's not saying anything. He's like so completely avoided talking anything substantive, any like actual issue. I mean, even we're talking about force the vote, somehow we're not talking about the fact that it was about Medicare for all.
You come up with a coordinated strategy, you then create good trouble, and then you put a spotlight on an issue where you are on the winning end of it, popularity-wise. So, for example, one of the things we did with Justice Democrats is as soon as AOC won, we did a sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office.
Yeah, I mean, that was so successful that I don't think I ever heard of this.
That put Green New Deal on the map, that put Sunrise Movement on the map.
Like, okay, first of all, so what the hell is Sunrise Movement? I've literally never heard of that. Green New Deal was just, that was fucking weak as shit. What the hell is the Sunrise Movement? Oh, okay, youth movement to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. So it sounds like, oh, it's a 501c3. An NGO, and it is also connected with the Democratic Party. So basically useless.
But in a lot of ways, it reinforced Justice Democrats being on the map. I want you to take those kind of actions. But you have to actually use your mind.
So, like, literally the only things he can point to, he can't point to actually getting any issues. Sorry. To actually, like, getting any policies, pushed through against the will of the Democratic leadership. He's not pointing to anything like that. He did a sit-in. This is like the fucking people who will still talk about the big marches to stop the war against Iraq as if it was a huge success because lots of people showed up. Rather than acknowledging that they were a huge failure because they didn't stop the fucking war and there was no follow-up. And the war happened and, like, like, fucking millions of people are dying as a result of it.
An independent judgment as to which action to take. So force a vote. Jimmy comes to me. Back then, we're still friends and allies. And I go, oh, look.
That's dodgy. See, that's quite an admission right there. Because that motherfucker's been dodgy all along.
It sounds like a pretty good idea. Okay, I definitely want to do something where we're forcing action, right? So what's your plan, Jimmy?
He always, look at this fucking face he's got. He's always got this very slight sneer going on.
He's like, well, we're going to force a vote and we're going to, get Medicare for all. I'm like, brother, I want Medicare for all. But you have to take steps. You have to take steps. If you go straight to Medicare for all, you have a 0% chance of it passing and you're going to waste the...
Like, what steps? Though, I mean, what are your steps? I mean, that is fucking silly as hell. because that was not going to happen. Forcing the vote would only just reveal that the Democrats overwhelmingly oppose it, despite the fact that the people whose votes they need overwhelmingly support it, and in fact, even people who don't vote for them overwhelmingly support it.
Power and the leverage. And who even...
Oh, well, he's explaining how he would be totally into forcing the vote, but, like, Medicare for All is too big or something. He's about to explain what his steps are.
Just get a Speaker of the House. And he's
that
like,
wasn't the argument.
Yeah, who gives a shit about a Speaker of the House? I don't give a shit about a Speaker of the House. What about fucking concrete policy things? Like, we're really up against it in so many different ways. And 70,000 a year was how many people the insurance industry were killing back in normal times, before we had an uncontrolled, lethal, debilitating, airborne fucking virus ripping through our communities with absolutely no mitigations. I say absolutely no, but that's not entirely true. Like, there's an FDA meeting that's going to be happening in, like, the next week and a half. About, like, the approving of the boosters and stuff like that. A lot of people are looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that Nuvaxovid or Novavax is one of the ones that gets approved. But what was really interesting in the announcement is that they're doing it virtually, specifically in order to avoid infecting each other. Oh yeah, wow, this is a beautiful screenshot. Please, somebody give a screenshot that. Drop it in the Discord. We can have fun with that.
I don't know. That's your strategy? No, I'm not going to agree with a moron who has no strategy, no plan.
Well, what's your fucking strategy? Like...
And not at all practical. We could have forced a vote on $15 minimum wage, and we could have won that vote.
And that would have been fucking worthless, because $15 a minimum wage was the demand 10 fucking years ago. At this point, $15 an hour does not actually pay the rent anywhere. $15 an hour as a result of inflation is basically fuck all. Like, I mean... But if you're gonna say... But if you're already... Like, there's no reason to say... If he's already saying in principle to force the vote on this thing. That just a different thing. So that makes it even, like... This is making no fucking sense to me.
But instead... to force the vote, we're like, yeah, well, you didn't do what I wanted. Okay, then I'm out. I'm not going to help you guys actually get the bills that we all want.
Like what? Like, which bills? What is the... he keeps on... This is a thing, it's absolutely just maddening that he's been doing around the transphobia and white nationalism thing, where he claims that he's actually trying to agree with people he's slagging off and very clearly disagreeing with, where he claims that everybody wants the same thing. First of all, I don't entirely buy that Jimmy Dore actually wants the same of anything. He certainly wants money, and he doesn't really seem to give a shit where it comes from. And there's a lot more money to come from being like a YouTube fascist, as he's decided to be. But when you do this is a very common move. You see this in a lot of liberals and things like that, who are trying to avoid actually talking about differences.
Oh, come on, man, grow up.
No, so Cenk, I would point out that Kevin McCarthy is still Speaker of the House. The issue was not whether or not Nancy Pelosi would necessarily become Speaker. The left, people
Brianna,
like yourselves. Wait a minute.
Who is going to replace Nancy Pelosi? Did you guys have a candidate? Who?
Cenk, if I could.
He's just interrupting her, but she's about to make a totally valid point. What she was saying is that, the worst fucking Republicans basically held the office of Speaker of the House hostage in order to extract explicit concessions from Kevin McCarthy. And they did it, and they allowed that to go on for quite some time. I think it was 11 votes he lost before the one he finally won, and he made concessions every single step of the way. And what she's saying is, it isn't a matter of replacing Pelosi necessarily. It was a matter of getting concessions out of her. Now, I think this is a waste of fucking time. But, I mean, at the very least, we could be serious about what the discussion is about.
Could the right-wing caucus got a...
I mean, like, actually, I mean, at this point, like, a fucking... you could go to any taxidermist, really, and replace Nancy Pelosi.
number of meaningful concessions, regardless
But that's
of...
not what
Wait a
we were
minute,
going for,
excuse me.
Brianna. That's
Excuse
exactly
me.
the problem. If they said, let's go
Excuse
for
me.
meaningful concessions, I would have been in. They said, we're going to get Medicare for all.
Jay?
Sure.
That is a meaningful concession. But this is a separate thing. He's talking about two fucking different things.
With all
we
due
are.
respect, your
Fantasyland.
characterization of what happened, I think, is reflective of the lack of grace and communication that was happening among the left at the time.
No, I don't think that it's a lack of grace and communication. I think he's being dishonest. Now, he's coming close to admitting the real issue here. Namely, the reason he doesn't want to vote to be forced on Medicare for All is that it would show that despite all of this wonderful shit that he claims that Justice Democrats have been doing, all these great achievements, like they sat in fucking Nancy Pelosi's office and apparently made her vaguely uncomfortable fucknose. Like, who the fuck even remembers this other than him at this point? I don't even think it got all that much press. But the point is, the Democrats were not going to vote for it. If you have a vote for, if you had a vote, an up-down, like straight-up vote on Medicare for All, overwhelmingly the Democrats would vote it down alongside the Republicans. So that, that would completely screw up Cenk's whole grift, the Democrats' whole grift, because they want you to believe that the only reason they never do anything good is because the Republicans are obstructing them, or it's the fucking parliamentarian who they can fire at will, who, has absolutely no power over the situation. Or it's fucking Manchin and Sinema, or Cinema, or however the fuck the name is pronounced, who are two like just straight up hate figures. Who there's all sorts of leverage that could have been brought to bear on them. None was, as far as we can tell. Yeah, but the thing is, by actually forcing a vote on the subject, it would actually expose their grift. Now, the idea, I mean, if Jimmy Dore seriously thought that this would give us Medicare for all, I mean, that's just fucking wild. I could totally believe that he believes that bullshit, though.
And I think if people had been less motivated by the personal animosities against each other, it seemed that Jimmy Dore, you've expressed some animosity toward him several times during our short conversation.
Well, because it was actually very polite compared to what you could say about fucking Jimmy Dore. And
here, I do think if those personal animosities weren't at play, maybe we could have been in a world where you were listening to myself, Crystal Ball, Kyle Kulinski, other figures on the Cornel West, Chris Hedges, who were also advocating for this and who were being very clear that they're
also very like all sorts of dodgy people. Chris Hedges, like, why the fuck does this man still have a career?
Or any number of demands. I wrote an article in Current Affairs that set all of this out contemporaneously, so you can go back and look, that it wasn't this idea that we were going to hold the vote and magically get Medicare for all. And to the extent that that was your presumption
Brianna,
or your
you
belief.
I'm curious now. What did this Current Affairs article actually say? Let's see. I'm going to pull up this article. Okay, here we go. This is the case for forcing a floor vote on Medicare for all. Let's see what her argument is. I did not read this at the time. But let's see. We're gonna have a reading. So Okay, so the little blurb is that it's one part of a broader strategy for building progressive power. There's a fucking word. Okay. Jimmy Dore proposed a provocative plan to advance the Medicare for All movement. Refused to re-elect Representative Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House until she brings Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All bill, H.R. 1384, to a floor vote. Because last month's elections whittled down the Democratic majority in the House, it would take only a handful of Democrats to hold Pelosi's speakership hostage. Okay. And if successful, progressives could force an unprecedented public debate about the merits of an enormously popular policy that, because of the COVID crisis, Americans have never needed more. Okay. So this, so far, is actually sounding, I mean, not surprisingly, she seems to be more or less accurately describing what she said, and I have to say, this, I mean, her version is that it's forcing a debate here. But I still think that in the end, this is actually, all it would be doing is exposing the Democrats. But let's see, we've got a couple more minutes. By the way, let me just drop my Discord link into the chat. This is where you can kind of keep in touch in between streams, and make suggestions for videos and stuff like that. I'd love to have you join me there.
I do think that is
Name
a
one
real
other thing.
problem
Name
in
one other
communication on the
concession
left.
that you guys wanted at the time. Name one other concession at the time. Don't make it up now. At the time, name one other thing you guys
I invite you and the rest of the audience to go look at an article I wrote in Current Affairs magazine.
Here, let me drop that link here so we can actually all be looking at what she wrote at the time. Okay. Well, okay, she names, like, kicking Richard Neal, who opposes Medicare for All, from his position as the chair of Ways and Means. Okay, that is an example of a concession. Otherwise, this is the only use of the word concession in the article, I should note.
In November of 2020, in which
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he has not given a single concrete example of an actual policy that he has managed to get the Democrats to support that they didn't already support, and that, like, progressives would want them to be supporting. He hasn't given a single example.
I consulted with David Sirota and included a list of subsequent ancillary demands that he had written up in his own publication, and I linked to them and say that these are also important. The important thing is that we need to demand something in exchange for our votes. But we don't need to rehash that.
Yeah, I mean, she did actually. That is true. That is indeed. I mean, she does link Sirota's thing. Crucially, technocratic solutions must be wedded to the floor vote demand in order to spark the kind of public excitement that can galvanize labor social movements and voters. Progressives are buzzing with excitement because Democrats might for once do something bold. They might fight for something not because the cost-benefit analysis demands it, but despite the potential political costs and the threat of ousting Nancy Pelosi, who 3/4 of Americans believe should step down, practically guarantees breathless coverage from media figures on both sides of the aisle. I have to say, this is the best. This is actually, I had not seen this article at the time. I think this is reasonably well thought out. I think that it's actually doomed to fail. I don't think that the Democrats were ever going to do it, and they were always going to fight like hell to avoid being in a position where they would actually have to stand up to be counted for or against this thing because they know how popular it is. But, I mean, it is as good an argument as you can make, and it is certainly more cogent than anything fucking Jimmy Dore's ever said. But here, no, she's got this. Oh, she's even got this in here. She has covered this. Even a failing floor vote would force Democrats to own their opposition to a life-saving popular policy, and it would expose those Democratic House members who are thought to have co-sponsored Medicare for All to burnish their progressive bona fides without ever intending to vote for the bill. For example, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker co-sponsored the Senate version of the bill, but reversed their positions during the presidential campaigns. Okay, so she actually covers that base too. Like, this is actually, I mean, way more thought out than any of what, Cenk has been, like, trying to offer as strategies. Like, I mean, ooh, there was a sit-in in fucking Nancy Pelosi's office. Like, who cares? What did you get out of it? But it is time for me to wrap up. Thank you to everyone who's joined. Thank you, it's nice to see you, Mad Cat. It's always nice to see new people start returning. I love a lively chat, and that has become a regular thing, and I think that's really cool. I think we have a nice little thing going here. And, again, join the Discord and send me your suggestions. I would love to know what kind of videos you'd like me to be roasting. I kind of try to look at these things, but I'm sure there is stuff I'm missing. There are probably whole-ass chuds that I am missing who would be great to look at. You know, educational and entertaining at the same time, which is what I'm going for me to be roasting. So please, join, send me your suggestions. Hankito sent one just like a week or two ago. It was very good. It was very interesting. It was just another example of just how ignorant Bush is about, like, anything. But this case, it was him being ignorant about Africa, and actually owning how fucking ignorant he was. But, yeah, so please keep those coming. I think that's wonderful. And I look forward to seeing you Friday night, and maybe in between in the Discord. Here's that Discord link again. Gonna drop that. And then, have a good week.